Once he had a name, Rex, a loyal German shepherd with a heart full of courage. Now he wandered alone through the rain, forgotten by the world. But his story wasn't over. Not on the day he heard a helpless cry through the storm. The rain fell like a silver curtain across the empty road, turning the world into a blur of gray. It was mid-afternoon, but the clouds above made everything feel dim and heavy. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and pine. Trees lining the quiet highway trembled gently as the wind passed through them, carrying the chill of the storm. Down a narrow alley that opened into the woods, Rex limped slowly, each step careful and heavy. His once thick coat was soaked and clung to his thin frame, the bones of his ribs now visible beneath the fur. Mud clung to his paws and his legs shook slightly, not just from exhaustion, but from cold and hunger. The world had not been kind to him for a long time. He sniffed at an overturned trash can near a crumbling fence, pawing through old wrappers and soggy paper in search of anything edible. A few weeks ago, he might have turned his nose away. Now even rotting crumbs held hope. Still, there was nothing. Just more disappointment. Once he had lived in a warm home. He remembered the sound of laughter, the scent of food, the feel of a hand scratching behind his ears. But those memories were distant, fading like the sun behind the storm clouds. He was about to move on when something changed. Through the steady rhythm of rain and rustling trees, he heard a sound, a soft cry, faint but unmistakable. He froze, head lifted, ears alert. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a cat. It was a baby. He turned toward the sound, his body suddenly alert despite the pain. The cry came from deeper within the woods, where the trees stood closer and the light barely reached the muddy ground. Most animals would have hesitated, but Rex didn't. He moved slowly at first, then faster as adrenaline pushed through his tired limbs. The underbrush scratched his legs and branches tugged at his fur, but he didn't stop. His instincts, long buried under struggle, came alive again. The sound grew louder, desperate, fragile. Rex pushed past a thick bush, slipped slightly in the mud, then steadied himself. Then he saw it. Just ahead, half covered in wet leaves and resting at the base of a tree, was a small white box. He stepped closer, water dripping from his nose. The cry came from inside. Rex's heartbeat quickened. His nose twitched. And in that moment, he wasn't just a stray anymore. He was a guardian, and he wasn't going to walk away. Rex stood over the white box, his paws sinking into the muddy earth. The rain poured steadily, yet he didn't flinch. His eyes were locked onto the tiny bundle inside, the faint cry of the baby still echoing through the storm. The box was small, barely larger than a shoebox. It was soaked through, the edges curling with the relentless downpour. Rex sniffed the air again. Beneath the smell of rain and wet soil, there was a faint scent of baby powder mixed with something else. The metallic, sterile odor of fear. His instincts screamed at him to act quickly. He nudged the box with his nose. The blanket inside, thin and torn, shifted slightly. A tiny hand, pale and trembling, reached out from beneath it. The fingers curled weakly, desperate for warmth. Rex's heart fluttered, a pang of something ancient rising within him. Carefully, as if not to disturb the fragile life inside, he reached down and bit the edge of the box. He grasped it gently but firmly, his teeth sinking into the damp cardboard. The box shifted slightly as Rex pulled it closer, dragging it inch by inch, careful not to jostle the baby too much. The rain fell harder, the droplets making a soft, rhythmic drumming sound on the wet ground. Rex's muscles burned with the effort. His paws slid in the mud, making it hard to gain any traction. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. The tiny baby needed him. Step by step, he moved forward, every inch of the journey feeling like an eternity. The road was still some distance away, and Rex felt his strength beginning to drain. His legs were stiff and sore, his vision blurred with the constant downpour. The box was heavier than he expected, and with every pull, his body ached more. But the baby was still crying, faintly, barely audible, but it was enough to keep him going. A loud growl of thunder rumbled above, the sky flashing bright white as a jagged bolt of lightning cracked through the clouds. Rex's ears flattened against his head. But he didn't flinch. His focus never wavered. The first car that came down the road didn't stop. The second, a truck, whizzed by, spraying water onto Rex in the box. But he didn't stop barking, his deep, desperate calls cutting through the rain, his eyes fixed on the moving vehicles. No one seemed to notice. By the time Rex reached the side of the road, his body was shaking, his breath ragged. His paws slipped on the slick asphalt as he lowered his head, positioning himself protectively in front of the box. His entire body shielded the small, fragile life inside. The baby's cry had quieted now, barely more than a whimper. Rex could feel the weight of her life in his care. He barked once more, this time louder, more forceful. His voice rang out in the endless rain. Seconds passed, then minutes. Time seemed to slow down, the world around him nothing but the constant thrum of the storm. He stood there waiting. The storm raged on, relentless and unforgiving, but Rex didn't move. His body trembled with every gust of icy wind. Rain soaked through his matted fur, dripping from his ears and snout, pooling beneath his tired paws. Thunder cracked again overhead, echoing through the empty stretch of road. But Rex remained where he was, standing protectively over the small white box. His ribs were sharp beneath his drenched coat, and his legs wobbled from exhaustion. He hadn't eaten in days. Every part of him screamed to lie down, to rest, to surrender to the cold. But he didn't. He wouldn't. The baby inside the box had gone quiet. No more cries, no movement. Rex glanced down, anxiety prickling beneath his skin. Was she still breathing? A soft whimper escaped him, not from pain but from fear. Not for himself, but for the fragile life he had vowed to protect. His eyes scanned the deserted road, willing someone, anyone, to come. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the world in a harsh, fleeting light. The rain lashed sideways, stinging his eyes. He blinked rapidly, then lifted his head and let out a bark. It was hoarse and broken, barely audible above the storm. Nothing. Rex turned in a slow circle, tail limp, ears drooping, then curled his body protectively around the box once more. He pressed close to it, trying to block the wind. His sides heaved with every breath. His eyes fluttered. Just for a second. And then, headlights. Far off at first, like a flicker of hope in the darkness. Rex's ears twitched. He pushed himself up and limped forward, barking louder this time, forcing his tired voice to carry. The light grew closer, cutting through the downpour like a lifeline. The car slowed, windshield wipers whipping side to side, tires splashing through puddles. It stopped. The engine idled for a moment before the door creaked open. A woman stepped out, shielding her face from the rain with her hand. Her long coat clung to her frame, soaked through within seconds. She spotted Rex, who stood trembling but firm between her and the box. At first she hesitated. A stray dog, a storm. But something in the shepherd's stance made her pause. His stillness, his intensity, his desperate eyes. Then she saw the box. She rushed forward, kneeling in the rain, hands fumbling. She peeled back the soaked flaps of cardboard and let out a sharp gasp. Inside, a baby lay unmoving, her lips tinged with blue, her skin pale, her tiny hands curled in fists. "Oh my God," the woman breathed. She reached in carefully, checking for a heartbeat, and felt it. Faint, barely there, but alive. She cradled the baby close to her chest, her eyes filled with tears. Then she turned to Rex. Their eyes met. In that brief, silent moment, something passed between them. Understanding. Gratitude. "You stayed with her," she whispered. "All this time. You never left." Rex didn't move, but his eyes softened. He swayed on his paws, exhaustion nearly overtaking him. "Come on," the woman urged, her voice now firm with resolve. "Let's get you both out of this storm." She lifted the baby gently and carried her toward the car. Rex stumbled behind her, barely able to walk. She opened the back door, laid the baby safely across the seat, then turned and helped Rex inside, guiding him gently. As she climbed into the driver's seat and slammed the door, the rain began to ease, the thunder fading into the distance. "I've got you," she murmured, glancing at them in the mirror. One tiny life and one unexpected hero. She didn't know yet how much this night would change her life, But she knew one thing for certain. This dog had done something extraordinary, and she would make sure the world knew it. The storm had finally passed by the time Mrs. Carter arrived at her home, the rain now a faint drizzle that left the world glistening like glass. She pulled into the driveway, her headlights illuminating the front porch as she carefully cradled the baby in her arms. Rex sat beside her in the passenger seat, his tired eyes alert, still protecting the tiny life that had found its way into his care. Inside the warm house, the smell of fresh coffee and a faint trace of lavender filled the air. Mrs. Carter set the baby down gently in a crib near the kitchen, wrapping her in a dry blanket, her skin still cold to the touch. She wiped the rain from her face and turned to Rex, who had already made himself comfortable by the door. His weary eyes watched the baby, not once straying from her. Mrs. Carter took a deep breath, looking at Rex with a soft smile. "You've done more than enough, boy," she said quietly. She ran a hand through his wet fur, her fingers brushing over his thin body. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. Yet there was something else, something more profound. A bond had been formed, one that went beyond rescue and protection. It was as though Rex knew that in this house, he had found a new purpose. The next morning, as sunlight crept through the curtains, Rex was still by the crib, lying on the cool wooden floor, with his head resting between his paws. The baby, now named Hope, was asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. Mrs. Carter sat down beside them, gently running her fingers through Rex's damp fur, her mind racing with questions. How had the baby ended up in the woods? Why had no one been there to protect her? She couldn't imagine the horror the child must have faced, but she knew one thing for sure. She was going to do everything in her power to give Hope the life she deserved, and Rex would be the one by her side every step of the way. Over the following days, Rex's bond with Hope grew stronger. He followed her every movement, his eyes trained on her with an unwavering devotion. When she cried, Rex would nudge her gently with his nose, licking her tiny hand, as if trying to soothe her. At night, he curled up beside her crib, his body forming a protective barrier around the baby. His presence was a constant comfort, as though nothing in the world could harm her while he was there. Mrs. Carter couldn't help but watch in awe. The bond between the dog and the baby was undeniable, a silent connection that went beyond the ordinary. Rex had not just saved Hope from the storm, he had saved her in ways no one else could. One night, as Hope began to stir in her crib, Mrs. Carter suddenly heard a low, panicked bark. Rex was standing at her side, his body tense, his eyes wide with alarm. Hope wasn't breathing. Mrs. Carter rushed to her side, her hands shaking as she gently lifted Hope from the crib. Rex barked again, his eyes pleading for her to act faster. With trembling hands, Mrs. Carter rushed Hope to the hospital, Rex following close behind. The doctors said it was an allergic reaction, something minor, but in that moment, Mrs. Carter had never been more grateful for Rex's alertness. "You saved her again," Mrs. Carter whispered through tears, hugging Rex tightly. "You're my hero, Rex." Years passed, and the world outside Mrs. Carter's home changed with the seasons. But inside the house, there was one constant, the bond between Rex and Hope. What had started as a desperate rescue on a stormy night had blossomed into a love so strong that nothing could break it. Hope, now a bright and energetic little girl, ran through the backyard, her laughter echoing in the cool afternoon air. Rex trotted beside her, his once glossy black and tan fur now streaked with gray, his body slower and more frail with age. Yet despite the signs of time, his spirit remained as fierce and loyal as it had been when he first found her in the storm. "Come on, Rex," Hope called out, her small hands reaching toward the dog. Rex's tail gave a tired but enthusiastic wag as he followed her, his steps slightly unsteady but determined. He had always been by her side, protecting her, guiding her, loving her, and now as the years passed, Hope had become the one to care for him. Mrs. Carter watched them from the porch, a soft smile on her face. She had seen how the years had changed both Rex and Hope. The little girl had blossomed into a curious, compassionate child, full of joy and wonder. And Rex, despite his age, had grown into a dignified companion, the protector of the family. The bond between them was undeniable, a testament to the love that had blossomed in the most unlikely of places. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Hope sat down beside Rex, her small hand resting gently on his aging head. "You're my hero, Rex," she whispered, her voice filled with affection. The words were simple, but they held a lifetime of gratitude, a lifetime of love that could never be measured in words alone. Rex's eyes, once sharp and full of determination, now softened as he gazed at the girl who had become his world. He nuzzled her hand, letting out a soft, contented sigh. He had given everything to protect her, and in return she had given him the one thing he had never known before, a family. As Mrs. Carter joined them on the porch, she knelt down beside Rex and Hope, her eyes filled with emotion. "He saved you, Hope," she said, her voice thick with tears. "He saved you, and now you're saving him." Hope nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She wrapped her arms around Rex's neck, holding him close. Rex, who had spent his life protecting others, was now the one being protected, not just by Mrs. Carter, but by the love of the little girl he had saved. It was a love that had transcended the stormy night, a love that had given both of them a future. As the days passed and the years continued to move forward, Rex's body grew weaker, his steps slower. But in his heart, he knew he had done his job. He had found Hope when the world had abandoned her, and now she was surrounded by love and safety. That was enough. In the end, Rex was not just a stray German shepherd. He was a hero, a guardian, and a beloved member of a family that he had helped create. He had shown the world that some heroes don't wear capes. They have four paws, a heart full of courage, and a love that knows no bounds.